So as we continue reading through the book of Joshua, we are met with a really monumental junction in the life of Israel, and it feels like it should be a great champagne moment, but to be honest, it's really tough reading. Certainly from a modern perspective it is. There are the events where under Joshua's leadership the priests cross over the Jordan River and the water stops and lets the whole nation go over, and then they camp out and strategize with God about how to take the city of Jericho. And in the city of Jericho, the famous part of circling the walls many times, in the last day there's a great shout and the walls collapse, all except the house of Rahab, and everyone in there is saved because of the agreement that they'd made with the spies that she would be spared. And so begins the great conquest of the promised land. And in Hebrews it talks about entering into the Lord's rest as they enter into this new land of milk and honey. Now it may eventually turn into a land of rest for them, but at the beginning there is an enormous amount of battle and bloodshed, and it really makes for some grim reading, to be honest, with the amount of death and destruction that is attached to the new occupation of the promised land by the people of Israel. In Hebrews, like I mentioned, this is called entering into God's rest. And I guess the principle that I can make to the gospel would be that in order for the people to enter into the rest originally, there was bloodshed. And in order for us to enter into God's rest, according to the gospel, there is also bloodshed, but it is not that of the towns and cities that were occupied back then. It was the blood of our Lord that was shed in order to invite us into the land of God's rest, the promise, the experience of His provision and grace. So there is definitely a redeeming narrative that goes over and beyond the occupation of the promised land. But it was, hard reading, to be honest, in some of those chapters. A couple of other little moments that I think caught my eye. One was that Rahab, the woman who has a little brothel, and the spies end up there, strike an agreement, and they're saved and she's saved, is that Rahab actually is part of the lineage of Jesus. If you read the Gospels, where it gives the chronology of his family line, Rahab shows up there quite amazingly, that she's a part of this sacred line when she is a prostitute in a pagan city and somehow enters into the most sacred line in history. And then there's another beautiful little phrase that's used early in the chapters when it talks about the people of Israel have to ready themselves. And Joshua's preparing the people for the journey ahead and says, basically, buckle up because you've never been this way before. And that little phrase, you've never been this way before, I think still strikes true today, doesn't it? That often in our lives, we've never been this way before. There's things that come at us that we've never had to deal with before, challenges we've never had to meet, circumstances we've never had to navigate. And yet the principle there is that God will accompany His people. God will give us the courage and the presence that we need in order to advance and progress into the land and into the opportunities and into the lives that He's called us to live, even although it feels like we've never been this way before. So a lot of connection there with the folks of Israel, but also a lot of things that were going on that makes you kind of lean back and go, whoa, that feels a bit like another planet. So some very interesting lessons and principles in there where God is accompanying His people even through the battles and the roughest of days to see them occupy the land and ultimately flourish. So we will continue on our reading through, and until next time, peace.